So, hello, class. Welcome to week 1 and 2. The second lecture for this week is actually the scientific method application to research. So, we're going to learn this. So, stay put and watch until the end. The content of this topic actually includes objectives, concepts, characteristics of scientific method, the steps to scientific method, our research process, and the limitations of scientific method. So let's do this. We have the following learning objectives. So we are expected to learn the following: to articulate on the impacts of scientific method to the growth and development of science and technology. Second, to understand the concept, characteristics, and processes of the scientific method. Third, to know the limitations of scientific method. Let's see if you're going to achieve this learning objective by the end of this lecture. So we're going to learn the definition of scientific method. So scientific method is the mathematical and experimental technique employed in the sciences. And more specifically, it is the technique used in the construction and testing of a scientific hypothesis. So again, hypothesis class, it means educated guess. Okay. So you're going to learn or see by scientific method whether your hypothesis is actually true, or you're going to accept that, or you're going to reject your hypothesis or deny your hypothesis. Okay, and another definition is defined as controlled, systematic investigation that are rooted in objective reality that aim to develop general knowledge about a natural phenomena. So that's what the definition of scientific method is. Okay, so we're going to define the research. So according to McClure and Herson, research is actually an inquiry process that has clearly defined parameters and has its aim the discovery or creation of knowledge or theory building, testing, confirmation, revision, refutation of knowledge and theory, and or investigation of a problem for decision makers. So basically, class research in this manner. So you have your theory building mano, the creation of knowledge. So you can also either test or agree or confirm or revise or change or debate on the knowledge or theory that has been discovered. So that's why you have to study again on that because you wanted to see if it's true, no? So you're going to test if it's true and confirm kung tinuod siya. So you'll see, yes, it's confirmation by research. And then revise if it's not true. So you're going to see that according to your research, the previous research or data that was gathered was not true. So refute meaning you're going to argue, okay, or change, or you're going to disagree on a previous knowledge or previous research or data of research. Okay, so of course research is also done to help local decision makers in uh, choosing, okay, or finding solutions to problems. Okay, so we're going to learn about the characteristics of the scientific method. So first, they are orderly and systematic processes. So they follow a sequence, a step, or a pattern. Second, scientists attempt to control external factors that are not under direct investigation. So, scientific method class, they eliminate biases, okay, and they control external factors that might affect their investigation or research. So, for instance, if you're going to study about the effect of plants, the effect of sunlight to plants, so dapat they're going to control other external factors that might be kanang a bias to the investigation or to the research. And also another characteristics that it has is their findings are based on empirical evidences. Okay, so when you say empirical, that's factual or true. Okay, so in research class, dili pwede nga magdoktor-doktor tano with our evidences or with our data because once your research, okay, you have your finding of your research. Once it's being tested by others, that will be refuted, okay, or that will be argued on nga dili sakto, or your the result of your data or the result of your study is actually contrary to what they're doing. Okay, so that's why when you're doing your research by scientific method, you have to give factual, observable, and true evidences. Okay. Another characteristics of scientific method that we have here is finding of scientific methods can be generalized, which means that they can be used in situations other than the one under study. Okay, so for example, class, if you're going to study, okay, dapat ang imong study, it can be also used to other study. For instance, you're studying about the effect of what do you say? Effect of um malunggay, okay, the effect of malunggay in treating water, wastewater. So dapat that study can also be used, for example, in looking into the effect of ng talang banana peel in treating wastewater, or the effect of other, for example, kanang mga other type of plants in treating wastewater. Nga na ba, class, kanang kasabot class, pwede siyang mautro in other factors, okay? So another one is scientific methods are based on assumptions or hypotheses. Okay, so you build your scientific method based on what you guess, your educated guess. Okay, so hypothesis, and then the sixth one is that you scientific method, they are basically conducted to develop or test the hypothesis. Okay, so your hypothesis, for example, class, you're making you're doing this research with your hypothesis that, for instance, Bitanag Creek is very dirty. So your guess or your hypothesis is the possible causes of that kanang pollution to the Bitanag Creek. So first nimong hypothesis, for instance, mayong ka nga the cause of that problem is because of the wastewater coming from the industries, for instance. And then the second one, your hypothesis is mayroon ka nga the cause of that problem is from the wastewater of the domestics gikan sa balay-balay. And then the third one is mayroon ka the cause of that problem is because of the waste gikan sa mga upland, di ko nasabugin. So, and after that class, you have your educated guess. Now, scientific method, you're going to do that. You're going to research on that to see, okay, whether your hypothesis is true or not. Okay, so you have your first hypothesis. So after studying, you see nga, dili na siya tinuod, so you reject your first hypothesis. Okay, and then the second, after testing, you see nga, it's actually true, so you accept your hypothesis. And then the third, after finding, dili na siya gikan sa taas nga mga hugaw, gikan na siya diri sa CT. So you reject your hypothesis, Anna. So out from that class, okay, out from your scientific method, you actually develop or test whether your hypothesis is actually true or not. So we'll continue with the steps in the scientific method. So when you say steps in scientific method class, the first thing that you actually need to do is that you need to collect information, make observations, and ask questions. Okay, so you cannot do research, or you cannot do experiments, or you cannot do these things without first knowing, okay, observing. Okay, pwede man good class if you are not going to collect informations, basin magka ng imong buhaton is already done by the others. So you have to collect information and see if there's still no evidences or no studies being made, or if there is study being made na, what's the difference, or unsa may additional nga concern imong gustong hibal-an. And then eventually class, make observations, and of course ask questions. So the questions that you're going to ask class will actually be the questions that you are going to try to answer. That's why you're having this um experiment, or that's why you're having this research. Okay, so for instance, class, you have your questions already, so you're going to formulate a hypothesis. Okay, so again, hypothesis is the educated guess. Okay, so that means what do you think will happen? Okay, or what are your assumptions? Okay, so for instance, class, your question is, what makes Bitan Ag Creek dirty? Pero Usay class, you don't need to ask questions with that has already an obvious answer. Kaya usay the the problem with also kanang scientific method bitaw class in doing some scientific method is that uh they are doing repeated lang class ba? Meaning na nag-study ana or um kabalo na ta sa answer day ana. So there's no need actually to study if you already know the answer. So now for instance, your question is, what is the effect? Okay, kabalo naman ta nga hugaw ang bitanag Greek, and probably you also have an idea nganong hugaw atong bitanag Greek. Siguro I think kanang proven naman na siya no nga that's because of the waste coming from the household and coming from industries and other waste pa gyud, no. So now we'll see the next question is, for instance, ang imong question is, what is the effect of this kanang dirty water or polluted water to the fishes? Okay, so your hypothesis now, kaya ang imong buhaton nga hypothesis is, first, kapitan, ang creek polluted water will cause the fishes to die. Okay? So, or another nimong hypothesis class is pwede ka maingon nga the fishes in Bitanag Creek are healthy. Na. So with that hypothesis, you're going to design an experiment. Okay, so you're going to design the experiment, that experiment class, to see whether your hypothesis is true or not. Okay, whether you are going to accept your hypothesis or not. So in a after designing your experiment class, you're going to conduct your experiment now. So per the class na you'll get your setup is you'll get a water from Bitanag Creek. So that's your experimental. So you either have pwede pud ka class nga one half 100% Bitanag Creek nga water, and then 50% the second setup is 50% Bitanag Creek water and 50% clean water, and then another one 25% nga Bitanag Creek water and 75% clean water, and then 100% clean water. So that's your setup. You're going to see kung there's a difference ba with your 100% nga polluted water sa Bitanag, unya diluted into 50% and then diluted into 25, and then the control there class is your clean water. Okay, and then with that experiment class, you're going to observe. Okay, you're going to observe results. So you'll see sample after first day kung saan mahitabo, and then those waters kas na but nga nimog mga live fishes. Okay, so in the first day lang tawon nimo what happened to the 100% water from Bitanag Creek, 50%, 25, and then the clean water. So you'll see class with and then day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, or 1 week baka na nimo buhaton. And then after that class, you're going to compare the expected results. Okay? So for instance, ang ako ang hypothesis di ay is the polluted water Bitanag Creek kills fishes. Okay? Fresh water kay fresh water ba natong Bitanag Creek, dili ba na siya salt water, dili na dagat. So salt water fishes. So nakita nimo during your experiment class that it actually kills the freshwater fishes, no? So you're going to accept your hypothesis. Okay, you're going to accept your hypothesis, or nakita nimo nga may effect ang Bitanag Creek nga polluted water to the fishes. So therefore, you're going to reject your first hypothesis and accept your second hypothesis na pananglitan. Ang second hypothesis is wala ra day wala ray effect ang kanang Bitanag Creek to the fishes. Okay, so out from the results class, you're going to draw a conclusion. Okay, so you're going to draw a conclusion kanisha whether you accept your hypothesis or you reject your hypothesis. So if your hypothesis is rejected class, so therefore you might either have another or refine your hypothesis or create another hypothesis and then conduct another experiment. So if your hypothesis is already accepted or whether whatever your result you would like class, pwede man nga ang hypothesis is not accepted. You can still report the findings of that, give that result. Okay? So class, if your experiment, whether the result is expected or not expected ang yung result, you still have to report that. Ayaw ninyo doktora ang inyong mga result just to satisfy your hypothesis. Okay? So draw conclusions from your results and then report the findings. So you're going to make a report on that and then include the results from independent experiments and also, of course, your accepted hypothesis. So, mo na siya class atong scientific method. And with your result class, reported results, so you either have, okay, conduct additional experiments based on the accepted hypothesis. Okay, pwede mo nga magkuan na dayon. With expected hypothesis, with the accepted hypothesis nga, pananglitan niya, it caused death to freshwater fishes. Good. So with that accepted hypothesis, you create another experiment like the fresh water actually is kanang it causes harm to the plants pananglitan or other. Okay, so based on the accepted hypothesis, you're going to create another kanang research probably on that. Okay, build upon that. Okay, so okay, now class. So here, I already explained the diagram to you, no? But here's the step one. Okay, step one is stating the problem. Okay, so before you state the problem, class, you're going to observe first. Okay, so again, we'll stick with Bitanag Creek since you all see, okay, makarelate ta sa Bitanag Creek, eh, naglabay-labay mo din sa Bitanag Creek almost every day upon going to school or when you koan ka na, go to somewhere else, no? Malabyan man atong bitanag. So you're going to observe, okay, what actually happens in the Bitanag Creek and the water. So you observe a topic that can generate questions for further research. And then your question class, after observing, you ask questions. So you ask a question about what is being observed, and then you state the problem or the question. So that is the statement of the problem or state the problem. So the problem is, what is the effect of the dirty water of Bitanag Creek to the freshwater fishes? Okay, so that's the first one. State the problem. So now, class, you're going to, for step two, you're going to formulate hypothesis. Okay, so hypothesis class, you make an uneducated guess on what do you think or what you think might be the outcome of the experiment or the answer to your question will be. Okay, so for example, your question is, what is the effect of the water in Bitanag Creek to the freshwater fishes? So your hypothesis is the fresh water, the Bitanag Creek water will make will kill the freshwater fishes. Okay, that's your hypothesis, pananglitan. Let's stick with that. Or you can also have your another hypothesis. Unsay pwede nimong i-hypothesis class, okay, based on your question. Okay, so ang hypothesis again, what do you think might be, okay, or probably be, okay, the result of your experiment. Okay, so that's your hypothesis. Okay, so after stating your hypothesis or after formulating your hypothesis, the step three class, okay, step three will be test the hypothesis. So in testing the hypothesis class, you are actually going to do an experiment. Okay? So, for example, sa ato amang problem, ka-experiment atong buhaton. Pero in other research class, dili na siya kinahanglang mag-experiment. Ang uban na, they just need to make an observation. Okay? No need for an experiment. Ang observation, okay, an observation or an interview will kanang test the hypothesis. Okay, so in this case, since our example is about the Bitanag Creek, so we'll make an experiment. So you will develop a procedure to test your hypothesis. The outcome must be measurable. Okay, so meaning pwede nimong ma-count, ma-test, ma-measure ang outcome. So the first that you need to do, design a procedure that test your hypothesis to see if your prediction is correct. Sakto ba imong hypothesis? And then next to that, record all the data and observations and put them into a table that is neat and organized. Okay? So ang imong hypothesis, imong testing class. For example, I already mentioned this one in our katong diagram. Okay, so imong experiment, probably you have, for example, a test, okay, a container containing 100% of the Bitanag Creek water, and then 75% of that diluted na rin siya. Okay, another is 75 of that is kanang from the Bitanag Creek, and then 25 clean, 50-50, Bitanag clean, then 25-75, Bitanag ang 25-75 kay clean. And then 100% that is clean water. And then you're going to place each container class with different solution of the Bitanag Creek and a clean water. You're going to place, for example, 100 ka fishes. Okay? 100 ka fishes ibutang dira. So you're going to observe, okay, the outcome must be measurable, class. Meaning, imong gina-measure, okay? So you'll see, for example, in the first day, was there any fishes or fish that was killed, or sorry, that was dead, sorry. Okay, so namatay. Namatay diha. So, ihapon nimo sa first container with your 100%, and then 75, 50, 25, kanya with your control nga clean water. So i-observe nimo on the first day nabay namatay. So record that. Wala, 0, 0, 0. And then on the second day, record that nabay 1, 2, na. So you'll see, class, okay, after that experiment, you'll see with the uh counting of the dead fish that you see during the experiment, you'll see whether your hypothesis is true or not. Okay? So it becomes true, class, if ever ang 100% ay namatay or namatyan tanan, and then expected pananglitan test namatay si 100%, yan agi na nga matay kang 75, lagi na nga matay ka 50, na. You'll see, class, daghan ba'y namatay kang 100, then sunod si 75, 50, 25, or nangamatay na tanang naibbitan ag creek water, so pasabot nga bahalag gamay lang nga portions of bitan ag creek water, mga matay giday sila tanan, or wala gi nangamatay na. So that would be the possible nga mga um what that would be the possible nga mga results nga pwede nato makita, class, in testing our hypothesis. And you're going to again record that in your table. Okay, so magbuhat kag kuan dara table. Right, so that's your testing for hypothesis. And then the step 4, class, will be your gather data or data gathering. Okay. So in data gathering, class, you are going to do measurement. Okay. So measurement process is an integral part of social or physical science research. Okay. And measurement is not confined to numerical or quantitative specification. It can also be, or it can be qualitative as well. So when you say qualitative, class, it has labels or names assigned to the respective categories, okay? And for quantitative, that is any attribute that measures in numbers, okay? So your qualitative, class, dili na siya necessary, pwede na siyang mga categories, okay? So either kung may kag color, you qualitative in observation, qualitative gani, class, color, you see, for example, there's ang water, you're going to see, ang water is dark brown, yellowish, greenish, or clear, That's qualitative, meaning there's labels, there's names, and there's kanang respective categories. So, for example, watercolor, color of the water, So, kana siya, class, no? For quantitative, class, it is anything that measures in numbers. For example, quantitative, like how many fishes were killed, 10, 10 for day one in 100%, 5 for day one in the 75% solution, and then 3, So if it involves numbers, class, counting, that's quantitative. And then qualitative, if you cannot measure it in terms of number. Okay? So, kana siya, class, no? In data gathering, you can either have your qualitative and quantitative measurement, right? Okay, so now you're done with Step 4, your data gathering. So after that class, you'll do your step 5, which is analyze and interpret the data. So with the data recorded class in your experiment, you're going to see, examine, unsay pasabot ana niya class. So you're going to results and conclusion dayon. So you will record the results of your experiment and repeat the experiment if kinahanglan siya. Like, wala natarong yung experiment or panalitay na mga faulties sa imuhang mga setups, ana. So you can either repeat your experiment. Plus, no need to worry gid class kung mag-utro ka kay it happen. Kay it happen nga magpermi gyud kang utro. In my case class during my undergrad, no, during my kanang BS nga course, I actually made kanang nag-try gyud ko class katulo sa ako ang experiment or sa ako ang kanang thesis, no, and it actually cost me a lot. Kada utro na ko lahi na pud nga gasto, kada utro katulo ko nag-utro class. Grabe ka gasto, grabe ka kapoy, grabe ka hago. Pero yes, naman goy fault na I fault in the first experiment, so I have to do another setup, and then in the second experiment udo gitarong na nako sa class kay kabalo ko nga sayop tong first, so dapat din ako utrohon sa ang sayop sa second. But there are actually externalities ka mga conditions kas ba that we cannot control, okay? So mo to nga nakatulog ko class ana. So you are going to record again the results of your experiment and repeat the experiment if kinahanglan siya. Okay, if it needs to be repeated. And then you will state if your hypothesis was accepted or not and explain your result. So based on the data that you gather class, okay, so you can either say nga, the hypothesis is accepted. Or based sa result niya mo nakita that there's no actually in our experiment that we mentioned, no, about man to sa Bitanag Creek, the effect of the Bitanag Creek to the freshwater fishes. So, kag kung pananglitan, walay nangamatay class. Okay? No death at all. So, you are going to reject your hypothesis. So, whether you accept class or reject your hypothesis, you are going to provide your explanations imong result. So, you're actually having this class, no, questions. Is your data reliable? Does it make sense? So, in your analysis and interpretation of data class, you're going to ask these questions. Reliable ba yung data? Does it make sense? So class, you're going to put your data into a chart or graph and look for any trends. Tataon mo kung ang trends class, like for example, magkataas ba ang concentration sa water of Bitanag Creek? Daghan ba ang namatay nga isda or kung nagkababa ba ang concentration sa water sa Bitanag Creek, mas ano ba ana. So therefore you'll see class unsay mga trends sa imong result, unsay mga graphs. Magbuhat ka graphs or charts para makita nimo unsay kanang dagway sa imong result class, no. And then requires tabulation or encoding, okay, of raw data and analyzing the relationships among variable. Okay, so you're going to do that class. So class, akong for me, ginastorya class, ayaw gid mo pag doctor class ha, ginailad ra gid ninyo inyong self. So whatever the result is, report that. Okay, so because namgoy usahay class nga, ato na lang nang itamper ng result diha, uy, para mahuman na tas tong research, nga na ba? So let's not do the class. Let's not do that class now because we wanted to know man. Gusto man ta makabalo. So let's be honest with our results. Okay. And so class, in any class no, that's why you're going to analyze, okay, see and interpret your data. So with the result that you have, so may pasabot ana niya. So may mga ideas, so may mga meanings behind your result. Okay, that's your step 5. So in step 6 class, after you analyze and interpret your data, you're going to draw a conclusion. Okay. So with all the results class, okay, and analyzation of your data, unsa may ato ang madraw nga conclusion ana. So do your data and observation support your hypothesis? So if it is a yes, you're going to accept your hypothesis. Okay. So if you cannot make a definite conclusion class, wala kay pwedeng ma-conclude or pwedeng mapakita nga kanang result yun sa imong kanang experiment class, you may need to try the experiment again. Basing kinahanglan nimo nga mag-utro ka sa imong experiment. So this means that you may either need to rewrite your procedure. Okay, basin sa procedure ka na sa your class if it was not specific enough, or you may need to change your hypothesis. Basin sa imong hypothesis ka dapat mag-utro ana. So ing ana class. So and then eventually kung nag-utro ka sa imong experiment, so after that, mubalik na po ka sa test hypothesis. If nag-utro ka sa imong hypothesis, so mubalik ka sa test hypothesis, gather your data, analyze your data, and interpret, and then draw conclusion again. Okay? So the same if kinahanglan nimo utrohon imong procedure, dito mo na sa kanang procedure nimo class, dito mo na siya sa testing of your hypothesis. Okay? So, in drawing conclusions class, you base that on the result. Okay? You base that on the analysis and interpretation of your data. So whether your data, your result was actually it coincides with your hypothesis. If it's a yes or if it rejects your hypothesis. Okay, so that's drawing your conclusion. Okay, so now class, in step 7, you're going to communicate your results. So class ka na after nimo sa imuhang experiment, after ka mahuman sa imuhang mga gipangbuhat, ayaw nagtagui. Okay, you have to tell the people or tell the others or tell the report your results class. So report the results of your experiment to let the others know what you have learned. Okay? So based on your experiment, sa may nahitabo ato niya class. In reporting your results class, this is also one way of telling the others nga, oy, nastudihan na ni siya. Okay? So that's also para dili na mag-repeat ba class. Sige na lang sila study nga maski na-experiment gibuhatan na because you failed to communicate your result. So wala pud nakabalong uban nga na din nag-study ana and unsa day result ana. Or pwede man siyang studihan sa uban to agree with your either to agree with your experiment or to refute with your experiment, meaning to disagree or a change ba na. So, ang imong communication of your result class, this will be either presented as a lab report or a presentation or in a science fair, display board, ana. So, depende class. In some cases or sa kasagaraan class, especially in thesis, no, gina-publish na nila sa isa ka journal presenting that there's an experiment like this and this is the result. So, journal class. So, mo na siyang i-publish siya, na publication of that. Okay? So, that's communicating your results class. Ayaw itago yung result class. Kamo lang nakabalo, secret lang. Ingani day ni ana. So, that's actually not kanang you're actually not helping. Kasi sayang lang to sa tong effort class kung we are not going to actually communicate our results. Okay? So in summary class, no, we have here a diagram as again. Okay, so in summary, this is the process, okay, in doing your research. Okay, first, again, you need to identify your research hypothesis. Okay, so ang imong research hypothesis class, that actually came from your problem. Okay, so you have your statement of the problem. With your statement of the problem, you're going to formulate your hypothesis. So you are going to identify your research hypothesis. So after that class, you are going to design a study. So kanang a study class that is actually for you to whether test your hypothesis is true or not. Okay? And then after designing, mag-plan out ka on sa kanang dagway sa imong study, mag-plan out ka on sa dagway sa imong experiment. After that, you're going to carry out your research. Okay, so you're going to do the experiment na or do the observation na or do the interview ba, whatever the type of your experiment is. So you're going to carry out your research. And then after that, you have your data gathering, okay, based on your experiment, based on your observation, based on your interview, you're gathering your data. After that, you're going to analyze your result. What does this mean? So may pasabot ani nga mga result. So nga na blah 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 ana. So imuha nang i-analyze, okay class? And then after that, of course, you're going to publish your result. This publication of your result class is actually one way of communicating your result. Okay, so this is the entire research process. And then after your publication of results class, gikan sa imuhang either accepted nga hypothesis or rejected nga hypothesis, that can also be another possible or probable nga topic for another research. So if it's accepted nga a hypothesis, so pwede na po sila mag-hypothesize related to yung accepted hypothesis. Or pwede ba sila nga magbuhat again o experiment para lang tawon if really your hypothesis was not true. Okay? So, ingana class, no? So, moving on, why does scientists use this process? Ngano magamit man sila scientific method class? First is actually this one, their daily work. Para sa ilang work, kaya naman, ang scientist, ang ilag yung primarily nga work class, they wanted to search for new knowledge or build up a knowledge, prove a theory or support a theory or hypothesis, ingana or theory or law, ana, whatever class. So for daily work, not necessarily that each individual steps are used. Okay? So dili man necessary class nga for daily work nila class nga katong tanang steps ilang buhaton everyday nga hypothesis and then affirmative hypothesis, statement of the problem, hypothesis, testing the hypothesis, data gathering, ana. Dili necessarily nga kana tanan ilang buhaton every day. There is some class nga on a daily basis, um, gabalik-balik lang silang experiment. Pwede ingana, no? Basta, nagsunod lang na sila sa step class. Of course, it is widely adopted by business all over the country, all over actually class. It is safe to say it's actually all over the world. Mhm. It teaches employees and management to diagnose a problem. So, kani siya class, no? Ang scientific method class, it does not limit into the experiment nga type class. You can also have that sa social aspect, economic, or in anything. Okay? So when conducting a research class, scientists use the scientific method to collect measurable, okay, pwedeng maihap, ma-count, measurable, empirical evidence which is true, factual, correct, in an experiment related to hypothesis, okay, often in a form of a statement, okay. So the results class aims to support or contradict, okay. So ang iyahang gusto class, ang result actually, ang purpose niya is to either support or contradict a theory, okay. So that's why they're using this scientific method. Scientists use scientific method. Okay? So we're going to ask, where does this process end? Antod kano saan siya taman? Okay? So the answer is it doesn't end. Okay? Class learning doesn't end. So kaning atong process of scientific method, scientific research, it doesn't end because learning doesn't end. Okay? So the scientific method class and the research cycle only leads to progressively better understanding of a topic, but never a perfect understanding. Okay? So that's why if there's a research on this one, so they will conduct, so this actually with the result that was taken, okay, ato nga experiment, it actually leads to better understanding of a concept or a problem, okay. So but never a perfect understanding class, so there will always be a problem. So meaning, if there is a problem class, there will always be a, what do you call this, naagi room always for research. If there's a problem, there will always be a room for research. That's why it never ends. Kaya atong problema kaswasad na human. Bantay mo, in real life scenario, na kay problema karon ng giatubang. After that, you're done. So happy-happy na ka, pero pagka humanik, another problem you're going to face. And then after that, na-answer na siya, another problem will arise. So it's the same with a research class. It's the same with a scientific method. It will not end. It will just make your kung sa kwan pa, sa research pa, it will just make a better understanding. Kung sa life pa, it will just make a better kanang condition, pero never a perfect nga condition sa imuha. So the same with class, for instance, problema nimo karon pag eskwela. Okay, go study, padayon, lahutay, persevere, okay? But after you graduate, abi nimo nahumanan na ng problema nimo with studying, no, you're going to search for a job. And then after landing a job, you're going to perform your task. And then every day in your job or kanang trabaho class, you'll always have a problem and things that needs to be accomplished. So it's the same with the research process class or the scientific method. So we're actually for me class no, I'm actually amazed with scientific method. It can you might think nga it can do a lot of things, okay? Or you might think nga daghan kay siyang mabuhat or tanan ba yung mabuhat. But actually class there's a limitation for scientific method. Natural limitation class, the first one of that is the moral or ethical problem. Yes, that's one question and one problem or limitation for your scientific method. There's human complexity class that humans are changing. Okay? So, karon, for instance, gani sa imong feelings, karon okay ka, the next time nag-uol ka, the next time the happy ka, how complicated, okay? And then, of course, there's limitation in the measurement of the problems. Okay, problems class arise na ay main problem mo branch out pag yun na siya into sub problems may na ba, and there's also external variable control problems kana mga external variable that we cannot control. So na mga experiments class no, for example there's an experiment unya nagi na mga external variable nga dili nato makontrol, so kana siya, that's a limitation to the scientific method. Okay, so if you're having an experiment dili magid nato makontrol class, for instance katong sabitan ag Greek, dili na to makontrol class if ever nga ang what do you call this? I-prolong na to ang hours. Dili na to makontrol ang time. Okay, so we'll go with the time. And so yun na siya class. Now there are some external variable control problems. So that's these things actually are the limitations of our scientific method. Okay, so learning all of this, will go to the next slide. So the first limitation of our scientific method class, we have here our moral or ethical problem. Okay? So most class, daghan actually class, no? Daghang mga, or if dili mga tanan, but most of the medical studies class would require a human. Okay, you require humans as their subject for the research. Of course, okay, it pertains to medicine man. So it of course will look into the subject which is kanang mga tao, no? So the constraints class of involving humans, kung mag-involve gani tag humans class, even gani in an interview lang, okay? So kung mag-interview lang gani ta, no? So ang essential ana niya is ang human behavior, okay? So which is essential for observing the human behavior for experiment. One is such is the ethical problem. So, ang ethical problem class kanang hangtod asa taman ta pwedeng mo dig deep sa tawo ana kanang is it still ethical, moral pabagyapon ni nga for example lang class, okay? They're going to study about the effect of a vaccine, okay? The effect of a medicine to human ana. So, ang ethical nga kuan ba class kay basin manggug na apay mga side effects ana ba. So, lantawon nila is this still ethical, moral pa ba ni nga na harm basin na harm na ang tawo. So, kana class no. Thus with that problem class naay naatay kanang problem with reliable scientific data. So, pwede nga dili nato makolek ang tanan-tanan kay dapat namgo limitation kay tao manggod class basi kinig-inject nimo dira no, ang side effect ana niya kay namatay na nung na kay asmahon man dayto siya. Unya ang side effect kay didto man day sa imong lungs, ana. So, for example, if you have studied 50 ka tao, wa magkakabalo nga kanang uban dira kay naa dinay sakit, underlying conditions. So, the ethical problem of there is basin bag maka-cause kag harm. That's why isa na siya sa mga limitations in doing a research good class, in doing engaging in the scientific method. Okay? So, dili na to makuha tanan-tanan as much as we wanted because we're limited to kanang the ethical problem. Okay? So, kung dili man gud ta pwede class, we should not do harm to our subjects. Okay? Especially if it's human. Mureklamo ba na class? And then, pwede ta kasuhan ana if we harm, okay? If we cause harm to humans. That's why class, we have this ethical or moral problem. Okay? So another limitation class, no, for scientific method is the human complexity. Grabe ka complex ang human class. Even gani kita mismo sa tong kaugalingon, no, sometimes ita kasabot sa tong kaugalingon. Unsa na lang ubang tawo ang mag-study sa atua, ni undergo tag scientific method wa na nabuang ng kuan mag-study kay wala gani kasabot sa tong kaugalingon, unsa na lang ang uban. That's human behavior is actually complicated class, subtle and varied. Dili ta pwede dili everyone, everyone is different class. Maski gani nagka ng makambal diha class nga parehan ka nagdagway and everything, naag yun na sila difference. So we are very much complicated. So if varied class, kay lahi-lahi kita. So it is difficult to categorize human behavior. Dili na to siya ma-put into box nga ngani lang gyud ka, ngani lang gyud ka, ngani lang gyud ka kay anay uban nga mo overlap siya kani, yan overlap siya sa pikas nga kinaiya, yan overlap siya sa pikas ana. So that's why it's difficult to box in kay our kanang category sa human class. So when human behavior is actually studied and analyzed by other human beings, there are personal biases that come into picture and distort the analytical facts. So kung ang isa ka tao class, mo study siya laing nga tao, sometimes we cannot do away with biases yun. Okay? So maglisod ta anak class, especially with the nature, if we're going to study the nature, the behavior of human, naku class, naagi na yung sulod nga biases. Okay? So for example, mayroon ka nga, what is the effect of, butang ka lang kanang too much engagement to social media to the behavior of a person ana. So class ang imong gistudihan is ang isa ka tawo is kuan grabe ka introvert, hindi siya ganan mag-share sa iyang life sa public, unya ang isa nimo kang gistudihan kay grabe ka extrovert nga gusto gid ilatlat tanan sa public ang iyang kinabuhi. So how are you going to compare two different things? Di man nimo pwedeng i-compare ang duha ka butang nga lahi-lahi class na. So that's one limitation of scientific methods kay class, no, the human complexity. So you cannot compare. Example class, no, ikaw na uy gwapa palagi na siya kaysa ako no, you cannot compare yourself to others kay lahi-lahi tag physical features. There might be something in you that is not in her or in him, or there might be something in him or in her nga wala sa imuha. So you are not, so it's bias when you compare two different things class. Dili pwede nga mayon kag mas importante ang gunting kaysa kutsilyo. Mana ka. Kay mas importante gid ang gunting ma'am kay pwede siyang makakat og mga buhok ana. Ang kutsilyo di ba nakakat og buhok, kutsili agin imong buhok ana. Nya daw be. Guntinga daw ng imo og mayon pagka kutsilyo sa giguntinga lagi na imuhang mga tagtarunon diha. Makaya ba nato guntingan ng bukog, makaya ba nimo naggunting ana. So pasabot class the same with humans class ba, if it's different dili nato pwedeng ma-compare. So mabias to din siya class. That's why human complexity is one thing that limits scientific method. Okay. Another limitation class no is measurement problems. Okay, measurement problems. Why? Different aspects class of human behavior, lahi nga behavior sa human are psychological in nature. So when you say psychological, dili na to siya ma-measure accurately. Okay? So lahi-lahi man gud siya class. Dili ba ka ang when you say behavior psychological, pwede man nga when you say butan or buutan, sorry, buutan. So, kani nga tao, when you are going to measure the behavior, buutan. Lahi man ang kabuutan na niya, kanibutan na, basta lahi-lahi siya class. Even ako karon nga nag-explain, no, it's actually difficult problem. You cannot actually give an accurate measure when you wanted to measure a human behavior class. Dahil human behavior class, dili siya uniform, dili parehas. Okay? Muna maglisod tag study anak niya, dili sa just certain. Okay, walay fix. And it's not predictable. Dili ka ka-predict sa isa ka behavior sa human. Maglaylay na class. Samot ka, daghan kina siya mga problema. Nya ka isa happy go lucky. Nya ka isang ka-subject kay daghay problema. Na class, expect ka nga lahi-lahi yun na siya mga results ang imong gustong ma-found out anak niya kay um lahi-lahi sad silang mga conditions class. So not all people behave the same way in similar circumstances. So kung tagaan mo na siya situation, dili tanan mo behave the same. Okay? So basin og kanang for example, if you're going to feed, talang ka sa you're going to see. Okay, you're going to see what's their reaction, the reaction of the people if you're going to give them gifts, for example lang, or give them food, ana. Dili na to kuan class, dili ta kaingon nga all people will behave the same way. Kay imagine ka sa good thing. Okay, good thing. Manaitan, gitagan siya good thing. Ana. So, gitagan siya pagkaon. You are not going to expect na mahappy na silang tanan. Nga naman class. Dili na din mo sulod ang complexity of human class. Kaya uban class nga, yay, salamat. Ako kay ning tabang sa kuha. Na din uban ani, hala, kagamay ba ning yung gihatag? Uy, di man tao ni sakto sa kuha, ana. Or sakto sa akong pamilya, ana. Then, or, hala ka nang napailain diha, mangita paglain. So, ingana ba, class, you cannot expect a person or all the people will react the same way with a given circumstance. Okay? So, pwede po nga, for instance, the same person, okay, not the same person, the same problem is given to people. For instance, na problema. Naiuban na naklas nga ma-depress, it's so hard, this problem is so hard, yun na. Naiuban po na nga, this is just a challenge that I must overcome, yun na. So, listen kay siya class, measurement problem, especially if your subject is human. Kaya nga naman, different siya in most kanang aspects, no? They do not behave the same way with similar circumstance. Maski pag tagaan mo na silang condition, the same situation, they will not react the same way. So therefore, class, if your subject are humans, okay, kung ang imong subject ay humans, measurement becomes a challenge. Okay? Ang pag-measure nimo sa ilahang behavior, pag-measure nimo sa ilahang mga results, it becomes a challenge kay lahi-lahi silang reaction plus lahi-lahi silang kanang lahi-lahi silang effect, lahi-lahi sila og hunahuna, lahi-lahi silang response okay to certain conditions. Okay? That's why there's measurement problems. That's a limitation for scientific method. Mhm. Finally, okay, another limitation to the scientific method class is your external variable control problems. Okay, so finally nagko class no ngit-ngit na akong background, dugay ko na akong mag-record. So anyway, ano to siya class? Ice break. Charot lang. So no, this one is that scientific studies conducted on humans may have a limitation of weak or no control over external variables in scientific activity. So na mga externalities class, okay? External variable that we cannot control. For instance, class ha, you have, for example, mag-study ka o the effect of a vaccine to human. Nga, nagkuha kag 50 ka tao diha. Now, ang mga external variable class, okay, for example, ang external variable is dili day na siya smoker din na siya. Okay. So, and that's another problem, yung other dili smoker. So, lang, i-eliminate na to na nga problem. So, dagkuha kag mga walay bisyo, nga walay bisyo, nga walay mga healthy nga mga tao. Ana, na daw class kay wala day takabalo na day siya kanang hereditary, na day siya mga underlying conditions nga wala pa ning effect sa iyaha, kay wala pa ning express sa iyaha. Like for example, may kag high blood din na ilang linya sa pamilya, ana. So pag-inject sa vaccine kay ning gawas ang pagka-high blood, ana. So there are externalities kas daghan kisa nga tanan that we cannot control, especially if our, again, subject is human. Okay? So external variable class nga, kay kung when you do experiment pang good class or when you do scientific method or when you do kanang research, you wanted to control, okay? Gusto kag kay control ba para dili ka makakitag mga biases, ana. So base manggog ka ng kung dili nimo i-control class sinailaing factors di ay nga naka-affect ana nga result. So that's why class there's problem with external variable control problems. Samot na kung ang subject again argument. But there are also other pagid class nga mga subjects or researches nga na mga external factors or mga externalities, in other words, nga again dili makontrol nato, no, ana siya. So that is limits. That's one of the limitation of scientific method class. Dili tanan mabuhat niya class, okay? So yeah, that's it. So that would be all for the topic of the scientific method class. No, I hope that you were able to grasp. Okay, bahala gikapoy na mo paminaw sa ka. I know kay daghan kay chika si ma'am, daghan kay lar si ma'am. But I have to provide you examples para makasabot sad mo dili lang ta magbasa sa PowerPoint class no kay og magbasa ra pud mo PowerPoint ngay kamo na lang akong ipabasa o na lang ta mo pasabta diha ana. So class, um that would be all. Okay, I hope that you're able to grasp, okay, and get the idea of the scientific method. So thank you for finishing until aning a part. So thank you. I will be uploading this. So see you in class. Have a great day, everyone. God bless you.